But here, like you're doing pretty good. You're doing well enough to where you're taking your kids to Spain. You got a couple Chick-fil-A's and still struggling with these things. So I love that it shows a different world than maybe what some people might have that's struggling with the same thing. And so, I mean, would you attribute all of this? Let me phrase it a different way. What would you say to someone that doesn't believe in God, that maybe isn't ever going to? What could they still take away from your story?
It's a great question.
Wesley Key has spent nearly 30 years building 2 Chick-fil-A restaurants in Bloomington, Indiana. Restaurants that have won just about every award the company gives out. He currently leads a team of 200 employees, and for everything he's built, he's remarkably humble about it.
My leadership team at Chick-fil-A would tell you, I'm really not good at finances. I'm not good at HR. I'm good at marketing. I love marketing. I'm not good at a lot of things, but vulnerability is something that I'm actually decent at.
This is Wesley Key's story of rock bottom and the peace that met him there.
I laid in my bed and I had my phone out and I started Googling, how do you end your life pain-free? And the first couple times I did this, I was like, what am I doing? I'm very sleep deprived, but I'm still aware enough to be what am I doing?
Today, he'll talk about 2 years he spent as an atheist, the losses that brought him to his knees, and how a simple restaurant vision statement turned into a book over a decade in the making, already carrying an endorsement from Chick-fil-A's own chairman, Dan Cathy.
Always had this lingering thing in the back of my head that said, you're not enough. Once I asked God for, a relationship and forgiveness of my sins, that was it. He makes me enough in him.
How do you maintain your relationship with God? How do you make sure you don't slip back into that same kind of anxiety or that same kind of depression again?
Well, to be honest, I still do.
This is Wesley Key's story of rock bottom and the peace that met him there. Hey guys, really quick, if you're enjoying this conversation, please subscribe to Mosaic Minds Podcast and click the notification bell. It is completely free. It just takes a second, and it genuinely helps us continue bringing interesting people with interesting stories. All right, we'll get back to the show. Wes, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being with us today. I know that Jason's kind of given me a little bit of your background, but I think I'm just going to let you tell us, your story and kind of what brought you to where you are today.
Sure. Well, thanks for the invite. I appreciate it. This is actually my first podcast, so I'm pretty excited to see where this goes and get to know you guys better and share some of my stories. So, very short version of my story is I currently live here in Bloomington, Indiana. I'm a husband of 25 years. I have 3 children, a 25-year-old, a 20-year-old, and a 14-year-old. And we spread those out intentionally for college tuition payments like that.
Yes, I understand.
My day job is I own a couple of Chick-fil-A restaurants here in Bloomington. Been with that company for 30 years as a manager, team member, franchisee. Kind of just climbed their internal farm system ladder that they've built up over the years. And then I dabble in a little bit of real estate just for fun. My favorite game growing up was Monopoly. And so it's carried over into my adult life, and my wife is a decorator, and so she helps me with that project. And then this latest thing is this book that I'm writing, which is kind of my passion project, and just trying to help people out with it. So
I've never been to any Chick-fil-A that didn't have great customer service. So is that what made you want to buy it? It's a proven business model.
I didn't go into it wanting to buy a franchise. I actually was going to seminary, kind of out of obligation. My background is my dad was a pastor. His dad was a pastor. I have probably 12 or 13 ministers in my family on my mom and dad's side combined. It was kind of you're going to be a pastor. And my dream was to be in the Air Force with my best friend. I caved kind of last minute my best friend signed up for the Air Force. I decided to attend seminary. And so my first week at seminary, I moved to Cincinnati, had no idea what I was doing in my life. But I found Chick-fil-A in my first week and began working there just as a part-time college gig, just to kind of get through, pay the bills. In my first semester at college, we had a debate and this is in a seminary, so it's kind of a weird thing, but we were debating the existence of God. And I'm already in this place where I grew up being taught who Jesus and God are, but I don't know them. I don't know them personally. And so I go into this debate kind of already in a lost space, I guess you would say. And I was put on the team that's going to prove there is no God. And so my roommate and best friend at the time, he was a high school award-winning debater. So we kind of had an upper hand. The other team really didn't know what they were doing. I was I guess you would call me a world-class researcher. This was pre-Google. All we had was AOL. You could go into chat rooms and talk to people. And so I went in and started talking to people that believed there was no God, and actually ended up meeting some in person, and just going deeper into why they believed what they believed. We put all our research together, come to the debate, and prove there is no God. And so everybody's like on our team is just super excited. We won the debate. They all walk away from this debate like, okay, we're done. Well, I went pretty deep with it, and I kept researching, and ended up becoming an atheist while I was attending seminary, which is kind of an
Wow.
unusual
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. I think that's frowned upon.
Yeah, it is.
Possibly.
And so it kind of forced me to walk away from eventually everything in my life that had to do with religion or God. I was just kind of like, I'm done with it. The only thing that stayed constant in my life at that point was the fact that I worked at Chick-fil-A. And I had no idea that, there's a pretty large percentage of the operators, owners, team members that do attend a church and they're religious. I just thought it was just a place to work and make friends. And I really had no intentions of leading. I came to work and I was a hard worker, but that's all I wanted to do was work hard, make friends, make some money. My operator, and that's what they call franchisees, is operators. We're kind of owners, but we're also, it's a weird relationship, owner operator. He took a special interest in my life while I was in this atheist phase, and he realized that I had leadership potential and I did not, because again, I just wanted to come to work, do my work, go home, hang out with my buddies. Well, he took a special interest in my life during this really dark period. And he spent a lot of time investing into me, growing me as a person, and that eventually kind of pushed me into the leadership role by offering me a raise I couldn't refuse. So that's kind of how I got into Chick-fil-A and stayed in it. Obviously, there were things like the customer service was great, the training programs were great. After I got involved in the leadership track, I could see why you would want to stay in the company. And so I ended up just hanging around, and here we are 30 years later.
So I want to talk about the book, and I'm sure this is probably in it, but normally we don't venture too far off into politics or religion, but I think this is probably a little bit of a different case here. So can I ask you, are you still an atheist?
No. So I spent 2 years of my life kind of just trying to figure out who I was and where I was at, what I was doing. And this Chick-fil-A operator was helping me just kind of guide me through some of this. He was not a religious person. He just cared about people. But I had my best friend's dad, who was the debater in college. His dad stuck with me and never gave up on me. And he had known me since I was, 5 or 6 years old. And he would call me, and we didn't have texting back then, I don't think, or at least I didn't. We had a pager and just a regular cell phone. But he would call me and say, "Hey, I'd love to take you out to lunch and just catch up on life." And every time I would find an excuse to not go, because I knew that there was probably going to be some sort of like, "Hey, what are you doing with your life?" Just that pressure from my upbringing coming in. Well, this guy was super nice, but he was also super persistent, and he kept calling and kept calling. And so eventually I just kind of wore down, and I was like, let's go to lunch. We caught up for a while. He asked about my life, how things were going. And I just really opened up to him and shared like what I was struggling with, where I was at. And he did something that I had heard 1,000 times in my life, which was he shared the gospel with me. And I had heard it from my dad. And I mean, we went to church probably more than some towns have gone to church combined. And so I heard this simple gospel message. I think the difference at that point was there was no altar, there was no one looking, there was no like expectation of your peers that you should go down and give your heart to Christ. And so there was something different about this particular time with this friend's dad. And I decided at that point that I was ready to make that commitment. And I did.
So so my dad is also a pastor, but he didn't become a pastor until later in life. However, I grew up in church since I can remember. My mom was the one really that always made sure we were always there. It wasn't even an option. So that being said, even though my dad wasn't a pastor when I was a kid, I can still kind of relate to that. Do you think that it's harder to be a preacher's kid or to be constantly at church as a kid and follow Jesus the same way that others do, or that at least appear to?
Yeah, I think there's this, I don't know that it's an unhealthy expectation, but there is this expectation that you're a role model, child and teenager, and you're just supposed to check all the boxes and follow all the rules. And the denomination that we were involved in it was a very strict denomination. And so there was a lot of man-made rules that were added on to, just the simple gospel. And I'm a pretty simple-minded person. For me, once I received Christ, it was like, okay, it's basically you love God, you treat people right, like live by the golden rule. But all the man-made rules that were added on, I couldn't really adapt to.
Yeah.
I just felt like they were a little bit extra. But I think growing up, it was, you felt this pressure, at least I did, that was you had to be this role model for the rest of the youth. And it felt like the church members were always looking at you and judging you. I don't think they actually were. But for me, it created this narrative, and I actually just shared it on my Facebook and Instagram post this last week, where it builds into your mind this loop that you were never enough. And that theme has followed me through my life in church, my relationship with God, my workplace, friendships. Basically, everywhere I go, I've always had this lingering thing in the back of my head that said, "You're not enough." And it really took me hitting rock bottom at the age of 44 to realize that I am enough. That there's once I asked God for a relationship and forgiveness of my sins, like that was it. Like He makes me enough in Him. And so that was a battle that I fought with as a pastor's kid my whole life. And I know a lot of my friends have voiced the same thing over the years, that they just really struggled with that expectation.
So, kind of in the thread of the Mosaic here, I like to do this from time to time. So, got to use some poor dad humor on you. So, it's nice to catch up with you. With the ownership of the Chick-fil-A. I've always thought that Chick-fil-A has kind of a I don't want to call it an undertone. I think it's very treating people right, being kind to others, saying thank you. They always say it's my pleasure as opposed to just a quick thank you or whatnot. But threading that into your church background and your current, then let's also kind of throw the book in there too as far as the recipe goes. So when everything merges together, let's talk to the audience a little bit about kind of what the book is, maybe the title of it, where can you find it, the work into it, and maybe why you did that. I know that's a multi-layered, but just tell me a little bit about the book. I'll let you take it from there.
So I brought one with me. This is the copy, and this is actually my personal copy. And so when I give a lot of these out. I just received like the first batch of 1,000 that were kind of for marketing or giveaways. And that was very intentional because I didn't write this book to get rich. Um, I wrote it because really God asked me to. And there was about 10 years ago, I told my wife, I said, I really want to write a book someday about kind of my failures in life, my mistakes. And really, it was just going to be for my kids. And hopefully, they can learn and not do the things that I did that caused me grief. Well, I sat on this book for 10 years. And I was going through a selection process with Chick-fil-A all of 2025. And basically the way that works is, we're selected as like hungry, uh, entrepreneurial minded people that want to continue to grow a business and give back more to your community. We want to create opportunities for our employees that we couldn't if we just had one restaurant. And so most of my teams have been with me for, I would say, 8 to 15 years. They've been with me through the good, the bad, the ugly. And so we were going for our third Chick-fil-A here in Bloomington. And on paper, it would have definitely been a yes. But there were some things that happened internally and in corporation that it turned out to be a no. And it was the most crushing, disappointing no of my career. Like it really made me sit back on my heels and wonder, like, what, where did you go wrong? But during this whole process, God started waking me up and literally waking me up at 2:30 in the morning and saying, it's time to write this book. And I realized looking back, like if I would have gotten a yes to this third Chick-fil-A and continued to build this Bloomington Chick-fil-A empire, I would have never written this book, or at least it would have been another 10 years, because you get a new restaurant and you hire another 150 to 200 people, and you're going to be tied up for the next 5 to 10 years just trying to get that thing solidified and make it the great, customer service experience and team member experience that Chick-fil-A has been known to be. And so I really felt like this door was closed for a very specific reason. And it was this book. And I think God, there's different times in your life where he says, this chapter may not be closing completely, but I'm opening up this new chapter that you weren't expecting. And so I left seminary at the age of 20, 21, never having fulfilled, that, I guess, the reason that I would have went there. But now I've still got this great Chick-fil-A opportunity. I've got 2 restaurants here. We have 200 fantastic employees. But now he's opened this door where I've written this book, and it went from this, like, here's what not to do in your life for my kids' book, to this book that I hope meets people where they're at in life, in their brokenness, in their hurt, if they're lost. I wrote this book coming off the hills of like a midlife crisis, and it's pretty vulnerable. It goes really deep, and that's the thing that I keep hearing from the people that have kind of test read it for me is like, this book is raw, it's vulnerable, it spoke to me really deeply. I'm not an experienced writer as far as like a book. I've written my whole life, I've journaled my whole life. So this is like my first go at this. But I feel like it was really, God giving me the words to say, giving me the themes of it. It was just, I never would have imagined it would have happened this way. I was just going to take my journals and write this book for my kids. But everybody that's read it so far, and I'm talking people from, people that are like hardcore believers in Christ to people that work with me that are, on the atheist side of things. But my Chick-fil-A is not, you think about Chick-fil-A and you think, what's this Christian business? And it's really not. We're made up of people that are Christians, atheists, and everything in between. There is a large percentage of people that are probably church-going believers. But even in my own business, I'm in a college town. It's very diverse. I have people from every walk of life that come through my doors, both as customers and team members. And so I've had people that have read this book that are on maybe the far end of the spectrum from what this book is about. And it's touched them. And so for me, it was never like, hey, I want to write a bestseller. It was just, I want to write something that helps people where they're at in life. And I really hope that's what happens with this.
You had mentioned earlier that it was about at 44 where you kind of, was that rock bottom, like 44?
That was rock bottom.
Okay. So yeah, so you mentioned, and if you don't mind me asking, how old are you now?
I'm 48.
48. So. Okay. So I'm right around the same age. Jason's right around the same age. I can relate to some of this stuff so much because, you get to a point where at this point in your life where it's like, now in my situation, my kids are a little older. I'm divorced. So it's kind of like, what's your purpose now? You know what I mean? It's like, what, what do I do? Like, how do I even exist? Because there's no one here to watch me exist. You know what I mean? Can you speak a little bit to that? Because I would imagine that has to be, when I think of a midlife crisis, that's what I think of. And also, what would you consider rock bottom? Like, what was your rock bottom?
This will be deep, for at least for me. So I felt like I had a real calling and purpose for the first 20 something years of my Chick-fil-A career. And it's not that Chick-fil-A changed, but I was this person for everyone else my whole life that was like the quiet, calm, reassuring encourager. And for me, I just stuffed everything inside. Like if I had an issue or a problem, it was just like, just push it inside and it'll internalize, it'll take care of itself. You're strong. You don't need a therapist. You don't need anything but you and God. In 2019, everything shifted. It was kind of like the lights just started slowly being turned off. And I didn't know they were being turned off. My mom passed away in 2019 after a 10-year battle with Alzheimer's. And that was what really triggered it, I think, was I visited her in April of 2019 in Alabama. And for the first time in my life, the person that brought me into the world didn't recognize me. And there's something inside of you that just breaks. And it's soul crushing. But I made the mistake of not going back to see her before she passed away 2 months later. And so I lived with a lot of blame and guilt for the next several years. 6 months later, so this was June, 6 months later, my closest cousin, who was basically my brother growing up, we were 1 year apart, he passed away. And it was a very tragic incident. His mom passed away when he was 16. And not too long after, he got really messed up in drugs and alcohol, and his life just kind of went off the rails. Well, I saw him this was 6 months after my mom passed away, at our annual Christmas event. And this was at my grandmother's house, and I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. He had been in and out of rehab, and he had been clean for a year at this point. And so he and I spent an hour and a half outside away from the family, just catching up, talking about life. He was actually serving in ministry, helping other people that were coming out of addiction. And he left the family reunion or family Christmas party that night and disappeared. And so the next day, his sister texted me and she said, "Eric is gone. We don't know where he is." He left home, left his wallet, his keys, everything. Well, they found him 3 days later. He had OD'd.
Oh, God.
And so those two deaths were just like, kind of rocked me to my core. 2 months later, COVID started, and we all know what COVID did to everyone.
Mhm.
I mean, it was just tragic in a lot of ways. And about 2 months later, my last living grandparent, who was basically the rock of our family, the glue of our family, she passed away. And this was all in my mom's side of the family. And so those three deaths happened. COVID took off in a fierce way. I was trying to lead 200 employees through the most tumultuous time of their life. We were trying to redo our whole business because the dining room went away, which to me, the dining room is like the heart of our business. It's like where community happens. And that all went away. We were just drive through, which we did well, but it took away like the heart and soul of what we do. And we tried to mimic it. We tried to like still be a light in everyone's day because people were just, living in darkness. It was rough. And so all this weight just like kept piling up and piling up and piling up. Inflation started in 2021, 2022. And I would consider myself a pretty successful business owner at this point. We've won every award you could win in Chick-fil-A. But all of a sudden, I found myself going into debt to keep my employees paid and just to keep things rolling. And so for 6 months out of 2022, I'm just like writing checks back, trying to keep things rolling. Well, somewhere in there, as these light switches are just like slowly being turned off, I started to feel anxiety. And I was like, I've heard people talk about anxiety. I have employees that have talked about it. I have family members that have talked about it. I've never experienced this before because I'm like the strong, resolute guy that's just like, we're going to work through this. Everything's going to be okay. And it started, I would say, quietly. It was just kind of like I would feel nervous or didn't feel like eating or just your heart racing a little bit. That was 2019. By 2022, it was like off the charts. Like I could barely hear myself think. And I couldn't sleep. I was losing weight. I wasn't eating properly, wasn't working out. Everything that you should be doing to like try to combat something like that, it was just like off the table. I hit rock bottom in October of 2022. So I do these milestone birthday trips with my sons. I have two older sons. And so on big birthdays like 13, 16, 18, 21, and now 25, we do little trips and then build up to big trips, as they get older. And so my oldest son was turning 21. I let them kind of pick a reasonable, trip. I use a lot of points from just using the business credit card. And so we went to Madrid, Spain, and spent a week there. Went to El Clasico, which is like one of the biggest soccer games you can go to. Drank coffee with the locals and all the coffee shops. Went to a flamenco dinner and saw like just the beautiful culture of Spain. It was like probably one of the best weeks you could ever have. Came back on a Friday night and I woke up Saturday morning and I was just like, something feels off. Like I don't feel well. And I don't go to the doctor very often. I'm not a medication person. If I can avoid it, I'll avoid it, which I'm not saying that's healthy. So I'm not advertising it. But by Monday morning, I was like, I feel sick enough to go to the doctor. And I couldn't put my finger on it. I waited until Wednesday because by Wednesday, I was just like, I don't feel well at all. I went to a local clinic and the guy ran all kinds of tests. And he's like, we're going to have to wait on test results to come back. But I think you probably have some sort of infection or parasite and we can knock it out with this super strong antibiotic.
And this is still in Spain, right?
No, I'm sorry. I'd been home and went to Atlanta and then came back from Atlanta. And that's when this all started transpiring. And so I started taking this medication. Day one, I immediately knew like my body wasn't accepting it. And so I take it for 4 days. It's a 10-day antibiotic. And I'm a rule follower for the most part. So if you tell me to take this for 10 days, I'm going to take it for 10 days. Night 4, by this time, my anxiety going into this was like already here. By day 4, it was here. And I probably hadn't slept in 4 or 5 nights. I literally laid awake at night, just eyes wide open, my brain would not shut off. And so night 4, I laid in my bed and I had my phone out and I started Googling, how do you end your life pain-free? And the first couple times I did this, I was like, what am I doing? Like, I'm very sleep deprived, but I'm still like aware enough to be like, what am I doing? And so I put my phone away, obviously lay there and toss and turn the rest of the night. The next 3 nights, I laid there and did more research. Just like, I just needed a way out. And obviously I'm not thinking at this point about family, friends, legacy, business, anything. I was just thinking about how do I escape this pain? And by morning 9, I haven't slept really in over a week at this point. I've lost 15 pounds in about 8 days. I told my wife, and those were the hardest words I've probably ever spoken, trying to tell her because I felt shame and I felt like I don't know where else to turn, but I told her what was going on. And thankfully she was able to put together the pieces and realize that this medication, she read all the kind of the background of it and the side effects. This particular medication, especially for people that already struggle with anxiety, is just like, I mean, it just ramps up your suicidal thoughts like that.
Wow. This antibiotic?
Mm.
Man.
And so she immediately took it away. And I'm like, well, I have to take it for 10 days. Like I was told to take it for 10 days. She took it away from me, thankfully. And this was, I mean, she really saved my life, I believe. And so, a couple days later, like I'm detoxing from this antibiotic. I'm not feeling these emotions, like these feelings anymore of like, I need to escape. My anxiety is still here. I mean, I'm still just like off the charts, can't sleep, can't eat. And gradually, over the next couple of weeks, it kind of tapers down a little bit. It's probably more like this, kind of in the middle. And so we're probably 3 weeks past that. And this is where my life really changed. And so that was my rock bottom in October. In November, early November, I remember one Saturday, I hadn't been home alone or anywhere alone in 3 weeks at this point because nobody wanted to leave me. There was still like this lingering fear of just like, what's he going to do?
Yeah.
Even though I'm not feeling the need to escape and I'm trying to tell people like, I'm good. I'm not there anymore. I'm just anxious and I can't get rid of that. And so I'm home alone one day. Well, I kind of forced the situation. My boys were both at work at Chick-fil-A. They both worked there through high school and part of college. And my wife and daughter were like, let's hop in the car and go to Target and just get out. And I was like, honestly, like I just need like an hour of just silence because my mind is still just racing and won't stop. And so finally I convinced my wife, like, I can do this for an hour and I'll be fine. So she finally relents and they go to Target. And I was just like, I just need really to be alone and try to hear God because I haven't heard God really at this point. And I felt like several years, like it had just been like any prayer I sent up went to the ceiling and right back down. And I know he was there. It just felt like I couldn't break through something. And so one of my ways of, kind of coping with anxiety at that point was to turn on worship music on the television or, put on my headphones and just kind of zone out. And so I put on, I think it was Elevation Worship Channel or something on YouTube on the TV. And I'm in my living room all alone and I'm listening to this song. It's called Same God. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but it talks about the same God that helped David in the Bible and Mary and all these people that were historical biblical figures. He's here to help you and to heal you and to lift you up out of, where you're at. As I'm hearing the song play, and I played it several times just because it felt like I could hear something at this point. And I remember thinking like, I've been living this life for 44 years now where I was a strong person. I relied on myself for, motivation, for anything that I needed really, for any kind of emotional support. And occasionally I'd be like, okay, I need something from God. So I'm going to talk to him and ask him for whatever it is. But most of my thing was like, I'm worshiping God, but I don't really need him to give back to me. And I don't want to give him all the control. And so I had held everything super close to my chest and my internally with my whole life. And I realized that as I'm listening to the song, like this God that, they're talking about on the TV, I've never really let him come in and pick me up from where I'm at. It's always been like, I'll take care of it, God. And so I was just like, you know what? I'm going to get down on the floor on my hands and knees and just beg God for mercy and for healing and peace. And so I got down on my hands and knees and I'm down there praying. And I'm just like, I don't think I'm actually low enough because if you believe in God, he's the God that created everything, the universe, all of us. And I'm kind of down there, humbled before him, but I'm not all the way humbled before him. And so I literally got down on my face, my hands, my stomach, just sprawled out on the floor. And I cried out for peace and mercy and healing. And in that moment where I finally like came to the very end of myself and I said, I'm done. I can't control this situation. I truly need you to take it from me and be that same God to me that you were to all these other people. That's when everything just kind of broke. And I didn't get up off the floor like healed immediately. But I've been in a lot of church. I've been in a lot of spiritual, religious environments. And as I'm laying on that floor, I could hear God speak to me. And it was like, I've been here the whole time. I've never left you. Your story is not over. And so from that moment, I began to heal. It was a slow process. Like it probably took me another year to where I felt like the me of a long time ago, but relying on God for, everything that I needed, not the old me. And that's, I think, really, I write about this in the book, and there's a lot of people out there that they're in that same place that I've been in, and they've walked that same path that I've walked. And my hope is through this book that, if it helps one person, this whole book, this whole writing process, everything, like I will consider like that's why God told me to write it.
You know what? I think that, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to say this, but I think that one of the most powerful things about your story is that, a lot of people think, well, if I was just successful, if I just had a little bit more money, if I was married, if I just had more friends, whatever it was. But here, like you're doing pretty good. You're doing well enough to where you're taking your kids to Spain, you got a couple Chick-fil-A's and still struggling with these things. So I love that it shows a different world than maybe what some people might have that's struggling with the same thing. And so, I mean, would you attribute all of this? Let me phrase it a different way. What would you say to someone that doesn't believe in God, that maybe isn't ever going to? What could they still take away from your story?
It's a great question. That's a tough question because I do look at it through a lens of like my whole life I've known there's a God. I went through that 2-year phase where I was like trying to tell myself there wasn't a God, but he was still there. He was still patiently waiting for me to kind of come back to my senses. But I do understand like there are people out there that will never believe there's a God. I work with people like that. I have family members that are, they believe that. I don't know. That's a really tough question because I don't know where I would be without my faith in him.
So I had a recent loss in my family, and what I wanted to tell you is first off, I'm blessed to be part of this conversation. Because the one thing that I can share with the audience and to share with you is since that loss, I refuse to leave a room without telling what my true feelings are. So like being very vulnerable to you, whenever myself and my family were around, it was always kind of known that you did care for someone or you did love someone or you wanted to see them. You really liked that meal. I'm trying to live with the mantra, religious, blessing other people, lightening up a room. Because I used to light up a room. I used to make people laugh. I'm so serious and grinding and focused that I've lost path of that. So it's inspirational hearing your story, bringing, down the Mosaic, kind of merging those two together. But I just want to personally share that with you because you've been vulnerable. You've said, you've done, now you've recalibrated. And just like that sunlight through the Mosaic glass in a church, literally, you're showing that light to everybody, religious, non-religious, struggling. It could be substance. It could be mental. I think it all merges in the middle because as we kind of gravitate more towards the middle, being blessed, being thankful, helping others, I think the world's a better place, man. So I just want to tell you that.
Yeah. And not to mention that you have it's a great testimony if you're trying to introduce somebody to God. I mean, that's an amazing story to be able to tell them, because a lot of people, like I said, different walk of life, they might think, well, what does this guy have to be, anxious about or depressed about or whatever, and I think it's a really powerful testimony to be able to share with someone if you were trying to, in fact, share the gospel. But how do you maintain your relationship with God? Like, how do you make sure you don't slip back into that same kind of anxiety or that same kind of depression again?
Well, to be honest, I still do. I mean, at the end of the day, like, so I have friends that are like, they talk about Christians or believers, and they kind of have this thought that believers are perfect people. And my pastor, he preaches, I got a church in Bloomington called Emmanuel, and he talks constantly about the fact that we are all sinners. Whether we believe in God or not, we're sinners. Whether I'm a Christian, I go to church every single Sunday of the year, I'm still a sinner. That's the thing that separates me from God. If you took away my sin, like, what separates me from him at that point? And so I don't know that anxiety is a sin, but I do slide back into it. This past year, I'll just share this, like, so I was never a public speaker. I ran from public speaking. I have 2 businesses in this community. I'm kind of seen as a community leader just because, we're pretty generous, and we try to do a lot of good work with different organizations and donate food and serve there. But I would get asked all the time because of that, like, hey, you should come speak at this event. And I would always have a reason to not do it because I was terrified. There are a million other things I would rather do than get up in front of people and speak. And the anxiety part of that would just explode. Like, if you asked me to come speak at an event right now or back then, I would have just went into panic mode. Back in November, I had a friend that asked me, she said, hey, we love your story because I've been writing a lot of stuff on Facebook. She said, would you come speak at our recovery home gala? It was in February. And I was like, Rachel, you know me, I'm not a speaker. Like, I'm a writer. I love sharing, just relating to people through writing. And she said, well, why don't you just come practice on us? She said, we don't need some like pretentious person that, can come in and deliver some great speech. Just come practice. And something inside of me it checked me, and it was God. It was like, it's time to learn how to speak. And so I committed to the event. And immediately, as soon as I committed to it, my anxiety was just like, and so I had 3 months, but I went into like, I've got to do this. I've committed to it. So I've got to figure out how to do it. And so I practiced all the time. I wrote my speech out within a week because that's the easy part, the writing. And then I began to go to my church and stand up in front of the empty audience, and I would do my speech. And slowly it became easier every time. But obviously there's no people. The only person in there was a robot vacuum that was running around sweeping the aisles. And so then when it came to like game time and I had to get up and actually do the speech, I was pretty anxious, and I was sharing everything that I just shared with you guys. Like, it was very vulnerable, very open, because the theme was hope. And I shared in there like my story, and then I shared about Jesus Christ, who I believe is our living hope. And I got through it, and I'm sweating, and I'm just like, I'm ready to go home and crash at this point. Like, I'm so nervous. But after the event, I'm out of 250 people approximately, there were probably 100 people that wanted to talk. And
Wow.
they heard something in my story that they related to, whether it was them personally or their child or their parent or something. And that right there was like, okay, now I get why you're asking me to do this, because vulnerability is like, I don't have a lot of gifts. My leadership team at Chick-fil-A would tell you, like, I'm really not good at finances. I'm not good at HR. I'm good at marketing. I love marketing. I'm not good at a lot of things, but vulnerability is something that I'm actually decent at. And so I think God recognized that, and he's like, you're going to have to do this public speaking thing. And you're going to have to rely on me because every time I've spoken since then, I think it's been about 6 times now. So about once a month, I get anxiety. I mean, I came on here tonight. I've never done a podcast, and I sat here for 30 minutes staring at the screen.
You wouldn't know that. It seems like you've done 20 of these and you're a natural, man. So I tip my cap for that. So
I
that's
appreciate that.
give yourself credit for that. So, hey, got a quick question for you. Want to ask you something random. I feel led to believe to ask you something. So, Nick's heard this 3,000 times, but he hasn't heard this before. Have you heard of the sport pickleball?
I love pickleball.
Okay, I do as well. So there's a new park. I hate to describe it like this. It's not a new park. There's a new court in Bloomington that has 3 courts with no fences in between. And I hate to describe it like this, but there's a park in Bloomington where there's some struggle going on. There's homeless. Do you know what park I'm talking about and pickleball facility I'm talking about?
So I usually play at Switchyard Park. It's probably about 5 years old, and it's kind of like the Central Park of Bloomington.
Okay.
And there is a lot of, I mean, our town has a lot of homeless folk that are like struggling through life, and they're kind of lost right now and trying to figure out what's next and where to go. And
okay, so I'll find the name of the park that I'm talking about because I know that may not tell you enough, but it's a brand new facility. It's less than a year old. There's no fences in between. If you've seen the court, you would know it, but it's not going to be a popular venue for people to play at, like the real players.
okay.
But I've got an idea for community event outreach, and it would be a phenomenal venue because you're literally a half walk away from 20 or 30 people that could really benefit from that community event. So I want to put together efforts.
I'd love to.
Bloomington's a great place, man. It has a special place in my heart. It's rocking right now with the sports teams and stuff. So I come to Bloomington 20 times a year through sports, fishing at Monroe. So we'll get together, and I can't tell you how much I enjoyed this conversation, how vulnerable you were, how you were not afraid to talk about the things where you did hit rock bottom, because a lot of people just want to simply talk about the great things, right? But I'll just say this. I was making some bad choices when I was younger. I would have been in a car and never came home that night. I missed it by 15 minutes because I fell asleep. I'll just leave it at that. So I always knew, like you, that the Lord was there. I tried to do stupid stuff and get away from it, but always knew he was there. And then fast forward almost 30 years in my life, I've had the crossroad at about that same age to where it's not that you go totally away, but it's just like how your heart is, how your mind is, how encouraging you are of others. And I'm recovering and getting that back, recovering from a mental standpoint. So that's what I want to send you off with. Show us the cover of your book. And the last question that I have for you is show us kind of a 15-second view. So it's Inspire, Nourish, Cultivate by author Wesley Key. Explain to me, my question for you is go each word of the title of the book and tell me the inspiration, maybe a condensed version of the inspiration of each word in the title.
Sure. And by the way, it was Hopewell. I know what you're talking about, the Hopewell community that's being built on kind of downtown area of Bloomington, and that's Seminary People's Park down there. I know we were talking about because we've actually done some stuff with people for the homeless community, but I'd love to do more with you. So this originally started as a vision statement for our Chick-fil-A restaurants, and it was a really long vision statement. It was to be the best restaurants for Bloomington by inspiring our team, nourishing our guests, and cultivating our community. And so that's a long mouthful when you're trying to teach a 14 or 15-year-old that is just there to work part-time, and they don't care about a vision statement usually. Usually your management team's bought into this. And so I was sitting at a seminar one day and I was like, how do we get our team to like buy into this vision statement? Because we're living it out, but they still don't know it. Like if I walked up to Joey and I'm like, hey, you know our vision statement? He's something about inspiring something. And so I was sitting there at this seminar and was like listening to a guy from the military speak to the whole Chick-fil-A family. And this was our national seminar. And something he said in there about culture and teaching your group or your squad, your team, it clicked. And I was like, we just need to shorten it and keep the vision statement the same, but just teach them those 3 words. And if they can learn those 3 words, they can learn the rest of it. And so I went home and I was like, hey guys, for the first 90 days a team member works here, they're going to have a special t-shirt that says Inspire, Nourish, Cultivate. And I put the periods just to like create emphasis. Well, then as I'm, thinking about this book, God wakes me up at 2:30 in the morning and he was like, you don't need a fancy title. Like you already have this that your team lives out in the community. They live it out in the restaurant. You've basically adopted it as like a personal mantra. And that's all you need to do. And Inspire is to spark belief first in yourself, then in others. Nourish is to feed strength, hope, and potential with what truly matters. And Cultivate is to build a life, a legacy, and a future one faithful step at a time.
Yeah, I have to agree with Jason. I mean, this has been extremely inspiring for me. And I definitely want to get your information to give out, whatever you want to give out, obviously, like how to get a hold of you, because I can promise you that after this, there's going to be people that will reach out to you and say, I know exactly what you went through, or I can completely relate to that. And so I guess, one thing that we're so divided right now, this whole country is just so divided, and it has nothing necessarily to do with religion or even really politics. I mean, those both play a part. But, when I think about people can't physically see God, but when I think about seeing God or being in the presence of God, a lot of time that comes from within someone else. And I hope you take it this way. I totally mean it as a compliment. But I mean, if I met you out somewhere, at a Chick-fil-A or whatever, I would honestly think this guy is a Christian, because you're an extremely humble guy. I can tell that you care about people. I can tell that it's not about you. And I love that, because you don't see that often, and my goal, as far as my spiritual goal, which I'm far from, is that people can see Jesus through me. And I absolutely love that you portray that so well. So that's my compliment to you. And where can we find the book? Because honestly, I'm excited to read the book. So where can we find it?
So currently it's on Amazon for pre-order. And it technically releases August 25th. I have copies for both of you. I just need addresses where to send them.
Awesome.
So I have like copies that I'm trying to get out to people that can they read it and they're like, you know what, this hit me in a certain way and I want to share it with somebody else. And so I'm trying to do this thing where kind of like I forget the name of the company now. Is it Tom's or somebody where, you buy a book, you give a book, kind of like that model. And so every book that I sell, I'm trying to find somebody that just, maybe they don't even want it, but I'm like, hey, I'd love it if you just take the time and read this and see if it helps you in your life. So.
And yeah, they may pick it up later on too. They say the teacher appears when the student's ready, right?
Hey, sorry to be Johnny low tech here, but what I would tell you is when we release everything, and we'll go over when that's going to be to our audience, we can open that conversation up there on YouTube, on the videos, like the comment section below. Let's open up some dialogue. I challenge us all to do that, to inspire, to minister, to encourage. Let's make an effort to do that and just get a little, threads below it. But we'll maybe put our heads together. This isn't it. I'm in Bloomington enough. Both of us are going to eat dinner with you. It's 45 minutes up the road. We'll hang out, watch some sports together. IU Hoops comes to Indy a couple times this year, so we could talk hoops, do whatever we need to do. So super proud of you. Tip my cap to you. Exceeded my expectations.
This is what I was expecting at all. This is great. I think this is probably the most, I know for a fact this is the most religious episode that we've ever done, and I'm fine with that. I like that, because we don't normally do that. So I'll probably, this one's one I'll probably share, like, on our church's Facebook page and that sort of thing, just because it's been great. I couldn't do that with a lot of episodes, but yeah, I think this has been great.
I love what you guys are doing. When you first reached out, I was like, I got to check this out and see what it's about. And so I started, first of all, I love the thought of it, where you're just bringing together people from all different walks of life and talking about all kinds of things. And so I went through and I was just watching, and I'm going to continue to watch because there's more than I could actually watch in the last couple of days. But they're just amazing to watch and see, like, all these different people from all walks of life, because our world needs that right now.
Yep.
Like
Mhm.
you were
Yes.
mentioning, our world and our country is just kind of fractured, and it's
Yep.
cool to watch because when I was growing up, even if you disagreed with somebody politically or religiously, you could still have a conversation.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
there's not much room for conversation right now to
Yep.
even
Nope.
start a healing process, because we're so divided that we can't even sit down and have a conversation about, what's the best restaurant in town, because, well, you believe that, I believe this. And we need that unity to just get back to where we were.
We live in the greatest country in the world, right? We have the freedoms. My family and what they've done have showed me how it's like to, one family member went to a country where prevailing wage was 6 cents an hour. We don't struggle with that, but some in our own community do. So when we see those people, when people hear this message, when you hear it yourself, you're inspired by that, right? The audience has been raised by this conversation through what they heard. So it is a blessing. I have no idea why we connected on Facebook, why I messaged you, but there's a reason for it. So I feel blessed to have met you on there. And such a simple message, like you could have easily ignored me and been like, who's this guy? Like, why did he message me? Right. But at the same time, I'm very glad that we had this conversation. It was a blessing that we messaged back and forth. We got you on, and it exceeded my expectation.
Yeah. Yeah. Wes, where can people reach out to you? Where can people find you?
My son put together a website just so people can connect and send, get on an email list, and my social media. So the website is wesleykey.com. My social media.
How'd you come up with that? No, I'm just playing.
That's the key to success.
That was a good one. And then social media is just Wes Key on Facebook, and Instagram is actually a little bit different. It's Kelly's Guy. And so when my wife and I started social media, she did Wes's Girl and I did Kelly's Guy, and I just left it at that.
That's cool. Yeah, I like that. All right. Well, and I'll look them all up and put them in the the description, show notes, and all that. But I mainly just wanted to make sure that you want to be gotten a hold of.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love the connections.
Okay. Well, Wes, thank you so much for being on, man. And I have no doubt that we're going to do other things together in the future.
Excited to hear it. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it immensely.